Welcome to the Data Room, where we demystify go-to-market data for financially strategic execs. We deliver real-world guidance for finance and go-to-market teams, helping them collaborate to transform their data into a strategic asset. I'm Scott Stauffer, CEO and founder at Scale Matters. I've been a CEO for over 30 years at various tech and SaaS companies, and I've seen firsthand the power of using data and data modeling to understand what drives value creation in a business. Before we hop into the subject for today, let me just give you a really short note on Scale Matters, my company. Revenue and finance leaders would normally come to us because they're struggling to be able to answer important questions like what's the relative ROI of our different channels that we use to source prospects, or what's the root cause of our recently declining win rate, or maybe is my sales team sized properly, right, in relation to the top of funnel investments we're making. In almost all cases, their company's go-to-market data posture and kind of their ability to adequately model exactly how their go-to-market engine works is not really sufficient enough to help them answer these key business questions. And that's where Scale Matters helps. We come in, help them define a data strategy, help them to properly instrument their environment, help them to implement processes to maximize data hygiene, and then we deliver models and actionable insights to help inform their decision making. Our work very often kind of fundamentally changes the way these companies operate their business, largely taking the guesswork out of the equation. So, enough about Scale Matters. Today, I'm excited to be joined by AJ Gandhi, a true thought leader in go-to-market productivity and efficiency. Former sales and operations executive at a number of very well-known SaaS companies, and more recently, AJ spent the last 5 years as the chief growth officer for Marlin Equity Partners, observing and, more importantly, advising Marlin portfolio companies on how to drive more efficient growth. AJ has developed the Piston framework, which is kind of a practical playbook for improving go-to-market execution at a time when efficiency has never really mattered more. He's going to walk us through that, kind of what the data is showing, where GTM is breaking down, and how leadership teams can fix it. AJ, welcome, and thanks for being with us.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for having me.
So, yeah, I'm glad to have you. And why don't you talk to us a little bit about Piston and all the kind of curation you've done over all the companies you've looked at to arrive at this sort of framework for thinking about a better execution.
Yeah, happy to, Scott. I mean, I'll give you. Let's start maybe to think about the biggest investment in any B2B company, and certainly in a software company, and that is go to market. If you think about go to market holistically, uh, we spend a lot of money. It's 40% of revenue of public companies. You go look at venture-backed companies, it's well over 40. Private equity companies actually are a little bit more efficient. Oftentimes it's in the 30s. But no question it's the largest expense. But when you just kind of take a step back and think about what do we get for all that spend, and you think about all the different aspects of it, there's a big efficiency problem. So first of all, people have been obsessed with marketing qualified leads as, hey, this is the thing that we should generate that results in pipeline. But the reality is data would say only 2%, it's probably closer to 1% now of these MQLs actually result in a win. So that's not a very good batting average. Second is you think about what you spend money on. Typical go-to-market org is spending 65 to 70% on sales, as opposed to marketing, customer success, et cetera. And what do you have in sales? You basically have people. So it's, and people are just time and talent. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And there's just a ton of variance in how people operate. And what we see is if you actually look at the data today, the data shows that there's a real performance distribution problem. 30% of reps are making their number these days, and you've got a big separation between the haves and have-nots. That's pretty rough. And you're seeing sales rep attrition spike up as well as a result. you think about the time it takes to hire somebody, to enable somebody, to ramp them to productivity. That's like a 12-18 month investment, and you're losing. These days, it's more like 20 to 30% of reps who aren't making it each year. Either voluntary or involuntarily, they're leaving. Super high cost for an organization. And then churn. For the longest time, we said, hey, the great thing about SaaS, if we're focusing on SaaS companies for a moment, is SaaS is really sticky. It doesn't churn. Well, we just hadn't seen enough of the life cycle. I think now we're certainly seeing SaaS indeed does churn. And why does it churn? It's actually pretty basic why it churns. It's because people aren't getting value. So you all in, this a lot of go to market is process. And yes, there's lots of art and strategy combined with process. But if you look at something else that's process is like manufacturing, and we've had Six Sigma and Deming's work for 70 years. My quip is go to market and sales is like point 0.2 sigma. There's incredible amounts of variance, incredible amounts of waste for this massive investment that we're placing. 40 million bucks in $100 million company. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And the reality is it's only gotten harder. It's interesting. We when we couldn't go outside in 2021, the world was actually kind of humming along for tech companies. Now the new normal is hard, and it's been hard since 22, and it's staying hard. So the economy has been slower growth, interest rates, macro geopolitical chaos. Buyers have just become a lot more discerning after buying so much more, buying so much. So now they have tighter budgets. It's also very hard to reach them. Competitors are tricky now. There's a sea of sameness. So many categories have so many players. And you're not just competing against your direct competitors, you're competing for the attention of the persona that you're targeting. And so if you're targeting a RevOps leader, well, guess what? So are dozens and dozens of other categories. So it's super tricky. As you're starting to see consolidation and commoditization, you're seeing certain vendors get more desperate, more aggressive. A big place where I've seen that is in this space where sales engagement, forecasting, and conversational intelligence tools. Those used to be $150 per month per user for a best of breed piece of functionality. Now you can get all three for $150 or less. When I was at Maryland, we actually negotiated that down to $85 to $120 for all three pieces of functionality, which is basically a 70% drop in kind of price. So that's hard. And then certainly what we've seen is go-to-market tactics are dropping in effectiveness. SEM, SEO, hiring SDRs, solving for go-to-market growth by just hiring headcount is challenging. And then we're seeing churn. It's because customers are saying, "Hey, we bought all this stuff," and many companies have bought too much, and they're evaluating. Are we getting value from all these things? And is there an opportunity to actually, simplify this stack? So I think there's a big, fresh relook that's occurring with all this kind of go-to-market technology out there. So
Hey, AJ, on that point, do you see curiosity around AI and how that ultimately plays out as suppressing demand at all for the traditional tech and tools and stuff like that?
I think it's certainly having an impact, Scott, where, I think there is dissatisfaction with the status quo, especially with all these siloed tools, which are excessive, especially when you think about all the different marketing the go-to-market subfunctions, marketing, sales, customer success, et cetera. Um, so there's a desire to see it be better, but yeah, it is still pretty early. And I think there is some caution. There's a desire to experiment, but there's also caution to say, hey, I don't want to add more tool sprawl,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure who the winners are yet. I'm not sure about the platforms yet. So I think a lot of people are looking at, the market leading platforms to say, hey, what do you have from an AI standpoint first? So people are looking at Salesforce, they're looking at HubSpot. Um, but those companies are still kind of emerging their products. So I think there's just a bunch of things that are causing the buyer to be more discerning.
Yep. Yep.
As a result, I mean, I think what we're seeing since, kind of the peak, which was, kind of 21, 22. This is a bit of a complicated slide. This actually leverages Ray Reich's data for benchmark it, which I think is terrific. And while it's not fully updated, the story is right. It sort of says, hey, we've actually got a little bit more efficient. We were spending 45% of revenue on sales and marketing. We're down to like 40-ish, and actually maybe even to the 30s, high 30s. And this is for public SaaS companies. But what's happened is our growth rate is cut in half as well. So, our growth rate is actually, if, Ray just kind of updated me, it's like in the high teens now for public SaaS companies. So that's half of what it was. And that means efficiency has really dropped significantly. And this is his metric of sort of saying, hey, for each how many dollars of sales and marketing spend do I need to uh, have to get a net new dollar of ARR? So that factors acquisition as well as churn, and of course expansion. So um, spend may have gone down. That's good. Growth but growth has gone down, and a lot of things aren't working well anymore, and that's why the performance distribution is really rough. So it's tough out there. I'll give you a little bit of a origin story on the piston framework. So as part of my private equity job, with 50 companies in our portfolio, and works would go half of them, and done a ton of diligence. So, and over my career, I probably worked with about 100 companies total on go to market value creation. And what I found is well, I'll give you the origin story. In October 2023, I actually did a conference, and we brought together not just CMOs, CROs, CCOs, but also, RevOps, CFOs, and a lot of CEOs together. I would actually really assert, the true leader of go-to-market is actually the CEO and CFO. Because they're the ones who make all the resource allocation decisions at the end of the day. And they're the ones who sort of navigate all these independent functions that often don't align that well. And so when we did it, the first time we did it in 2023, we did a ton of uh, roundtables. We actually did 30 of them, and had a note taker at each one. And we talked about, hey, what's working well? What are your biggest go to market problems? Tell us about your experience with some of the biggest initiatives, whether it be pricing, account based marketing, partner strategy, sales productivity improvement, rev opsy kind of things. And we produced this 43-page note across all these things. We stepped back and looked at it. Well, the answer was, you know what? You know what the opportunity is to improve our companies? It's execute the basics. That's what we need to do. And so that sort of kind of began a journey to just say, hey, it's back to the basics. And that's really where this piston framework evolved. And this is based off of kind of my 30-year career in go to market, and looking at and working with 100 companies over that career. And so these are the things that I think are fundamentals, and these are execution fundamentals, Scott. So there is a broader framework that looks at, hey, what's the right go to market strategy? Let's think about talent. Let's think about kind of metrics and rev ops, et cetera. But these are the things that I feel are the most fundamental things to get right. And I actually find most companies have some big misses in this. So let me walk you through it. The first one is positioning and messaging that drives urgency. The biggest issue today is, we've probably all seen that Martech page that has like dozens, if not hundreds of categories and thousands of logos on it. It's like, okay, you're going to go to a CMO and say all these things are important. I mean, that's ridiculous. So the question is, why does your problem matter? That's really where you have to start. It's not why does your solution matter, but what are you solving for, and why is it meaningful? And why is it worthy of executive attention? That's probably the biggest question that companies are asking these days. Like, okay, there's all this stuff, but what are the most compelling problems that I have, and why is that problem important? How should I think about that problem? And then have it lead to your solution. So that's positioning and messaging. And if you don't do that well, you're going to get stuck with a mid-level buyer who's going to say, "Oh, I kind of like this, but I'm looking at a lot of other things. I can't get this funded." Versus if you actually identify it being a critical problem, uh, you're going to actually get a lot more attention. And I'm happy to walk you through some examples of this later, but let me walk through the framework first. So that's positioning and messaging. The second one is not just pipeline generation. It's funny. I go ask people, executives, what's your biggest challenge? Everyone always says pipeline. I'm like, okay, great, but it's not just pipeline. It's like ideal customer profile pipeline. It's great when you find people who are in market, but what I think you really need to do is you need to find people who are high fit customers who are in market, and you actually need to go cultivate and educate them about the problem that they have, and not just, pursue the ones who are showing intent signals. You want to get in front of that and actually educate them to say, here's how to think about your business. Here's kind of a key problem that you may have not realized, and then let's go after it. So what I've done in my career, and this started all the way back at Salesforce, was just focus intensely on who are the customers who have the biggest problem. So when I joined Salesforce in 2010 as VP of Global Sales Strategy, uh, we had 11,000 accounts in the enterprise, and we had 50 accounts per rep. Fast forward 2 years to 2012, each rep had 7 accounts, and we only focused on 2,000. So we shrunk it down massively by just figuring out who are the companies that have the biggest opportunity for us to drive impact. So that's ideal customer profile pipeline generation. When you're super focused, you do much better. Um, the third one is sales talent and effectiveness. And this is just the basics. Are you hiring well? And are you enabling people? And are you realizing effective productivity and performance across the team and retaining those people and managing those people? The reality is most companies are not. What you look at when you look at most companies is they have really rough performance distribution. So we talked about earlier, 30% actually make their number, but what you have is those folks who are not like the bottom 50% of sellers contribute about 10% of bookings at a lot of companies. So that's ridiculous. So that's a big problem area. It feels like a huge overspend. But it's not just, cut the team that's not working, but find a way to make better hiring decisions, better enablement, and actually get people to be successful. So that's just the basics of sales talent and effectiveness. And I think during this period where it was really hard to hire people, like 2018 to 22, because the economy was so hot, there was just a lot of people who weren't a great fit. And then, companies overinvest in reps and not things to make reps successful. The fourth one is team effectiveness and alignment. Marketing, sales, partner ecosystem, professional services, customer success, and then you can even throw in support and, of course, even product. That's what go to market is. It is those 7 functions. But and here's the problem. You don't really have an executive, whether it's the 5 functions or 7 functions or 4 functions, who actually knows all this stuff. How many sales leaders who now are now called chief revenue officers actually really understand marketing and all the different aspects of it? Do they understand inbound demand, outbound demand? Do they understand marketing operations, brand, product marketing? Not many. So it's like this is a problem. And so how do you actually get all these functions to understand each other and be aligned together? That's where I really think it's the CEO and CFO's job to make that happen. And that's not happening sufficiently in companies. The fifth one is related to, once you have customers, are you actually um, getting or delivering value to them? And are you actually able to measure it and not just do it to win the deal as you're trying to get the business case funded to get the initial new logo acquisition, but are you getting it across the board and doing it throughout the customer life cycle? I mean, why do customers churn? The reasons customers churn is because they're not getting value, and most companies actually aren't even measuring it. And they're not measuring it, they're not communicating it, they're not partnering with their customer on it, and so all this work was done to actually get the customer and all these promises, but it's not actually focused on. And then the final one is just really maximizing. Um, the customer relationship. It's not just about getting the retention, but it's actually getting the upsell, the cross sell, and actually having pricing power because you are delivering so much value. So NRR really is the kind of the key metric for fully being successful and leveraging your market opportunity. And what we see is there's so much effort that's put into targeting and campaigns for new logo acquisition, but being thoughtful about how you get the full value out of your customer base, that is something that's just not really focused on. Um, Before I hit the last comment that I have for you, um, why don't I've got two more for you, Scott. Why don't I give you a chance to pause now that it's sort of seen piston here?
Yeah, I think that's great. There's a ton to unpack there. When you were going through it, I was just writing down a few things, and maybe I can just hit you with these one by one, and then we'll see whether the audience has anything to add or ask. On the positioning and messaging that drives urgency, I actually saw a post by Peter Conforti at Good Content today that he had done a podcast with somebody or an interview, and she was talking about um, how all the messaging has become this sea of sameness, right? And she said she thinks that what happens is founders are the closest to understanding the customer problems. And marketing people aren't that close to it, and but yet a lot of times marketing people end up sort of responsible for the messaging, or you get kinda, committee think, etcetera. Any thoughts on, kinda who best to drive or how best to achieve the positioning and messaging that drives urgency?
Yeah. So I think what it fundamentally is about is um, being close to the customer and being focused on the problem. I mean, I think what you're really solving for is why does your problem matter? And guiding the prospective customer how to think about it. And I'll give you my observation of, um, some feedback for my colleagues in private equity. We do amazing amounts of diligence on customers, on the market, on experts, on competitors when we're doing a deal. But how often do we actually revisit that when our holding period is, 4 or 5 and even longer years these days? It's seldom. So, we can capitalize the expense of all that research up front, but we don't stay focused on it. And actually, I think it's the thing that, whether you're owned by private equity or whomever, you need to stay focused on the customer. And because their needs are evolving and offerings that they can use to solve their problems are evolving as well. If you don't stay focused on them, if you don't stay current, you risk losing product market fit as well as just being irrelevant or just sort of out of touch. And I think that happens to a large percentage of companies, Scott. It's super basic. Focus on the customer, but I think you're exactly right. Why does a company sort of take off in the first place and get product market fit? It's because, yeah, I think it is because the founder actually is intensely focused on, saying, hey, I see this problem out there for, this type of company and this type of executive for this type of business function. And I see this pain and, whether it's how you manage dental offices or how do you do service supply chain, how do you, manage, financial compliance. Um, and so I think you have to just be deep and then you have to come up with a distinctive point of view that really kind of makes the customer stop in their tracks. I'll give you an example, actually. This is a company that um, I worked with for pretty extensively for kind of 6 plus months. Service supply chain software. Sounds riveting, doesn't it? It's like, hey, and it's like and the current state would be, hey, you're going to go sell to the director of service supply chain and try to convince them that they should use your software when they have some kind of big ERP package that does general supply chain management stuff. So why would this matter? Well, if you go to a $1 billion plus manufacturer, you actually with thousands of products and tens of thousands of spare parts from thousands of customers scattered all throughout the world. How do you figure out what inventory to carry in the right place, such that when an imaging machine breaks in a physician's office for body scans and MRIs, well, how do you actually get that machine fixed as quickly as possible because you have the right parts there when you've been building imaging machines for 40 years? Um, And so that costs you from an inventory carrying cost standpoint. That costs you from a multiple truck roll standpoint. Rolled out a truck, try investigate the problem, don't have the part, have to come back, and that impacts from a customer, a huge customer value standpoint. Like, okay, the imaging machine's down. I got to cancel, dozens of uh, patient appointments, and that's not just cost. That's actually potentially even life and death.
Yeah.
So when you think about it that way, you elevate to realize, hey, the service supply chain is critical. And by the way, if that happens and your imaging machine's out for 2 days, um, your customers can be pissed. And they're like, why? And many of them have like maintenance contracts. It's like, what am I paying this for? Why would I buy more from you? It just makes them a lot more cautious. Has a huge negative impact on customer experience and therefore on their willingness to buy more. And then think about other things. Think about airplanes. If you're doing airplane maintenance. So how do you manage for that? Well, we'll just uh, level up the inventory levels. And so we'll carry hundreds of millions in inventory or maybe billions just to make sure that we don't have that problem. And that's something that you can solve and you can actually improve 30 to 40%. That sounds pretty worth it. That's an executive level problem that the CFO level, no longer a director of service supply chain.
So that's an interesting point. We see it in our own business that there is a very strategic problem. Like in our case, the strategic problem is efficient growth or lack of efficient growth, right? But if we go to the head of sales or the head of marketing, just basically down a layer from the strategic, um, they don't think we have an efficient growth problem. Like, for some reason, they're not getting that memo. Uh,
Um,
and
why do you think? I can ask you what? Why do you think that is? Since you work on metrics with a ton of companies, like, is it a business acumen issue? Is it a data reporting issue? Is it a
I think there's not enough, attention to value creation, right? What think about it. It's growth, it's the efficiency of growth, maybe some EBITDA and whatever your rule of 40, rule of X, metric might be.
Yep.
But the sales leader is thinking about his pipeline. Yeah, yes, it should be a component that gets you to the end goal, but if you're not thinking about the metrics that actually drive valuation, because pipeline itself does not drive valuation,
Sure.
um, I just think people get disconnected from the, strategic importance of some of these things,
I,
it's just
I think it's
fascinating, and so you end up sort of you go in and you say, "Okay, do I spend my energy trying to convince this guy that what he sees as problem is actually a lot more strategic, or do I just go with the way he thinks of his problem and try to figure out a way to create some urgency around it?" Which is kind of what most of the products do, or most solutions do, which gets leads to the sameness, I think, in my view.
yeah. Well, the product part of that is it feels like a different conversation. But look, I think the issue fundamentally is there's a chasm between the understanding of CROs and CMOs and CEOs and CFOs and boards. Um, so,
Yeah.
what does the CEO, CFO, and board care about? They care about, basically growth and profitability. That's what you get rewarded for. And I think these days, you have to have, certainly private equity. We want our companies to at least be break even, and we're very much rule of X oriented. And rule of X or rule of 40, whatever it is, it's really actually quite simple at its fundamentals. Hey, if we want you to have your growth percentage plus your margin percentage, your operating margin percentage be 40. So if you're growing at uh, uh, 30%, we expect you to be 10% profitable. your operating margin, your EBITDA margin to be 10%. If you can only get 15% growth, we're going to expect you to have a 25% EBITDA margin. But growth is still valued way more than margin. So, um, Ray's done great work on this. And he basically says, it's about something like 2x, it might be 2.5x, each point of growth versus margin. So I would say, as a company in private equity, we want to see you get to certainly 10% EBITDA margin. And we want to see both, frankly. We want to see both. But fundamentally, we want to get to the rule of X. We get some companies some companies that we, picked up at rule of 45. We took them to like 57 because we improved profitability and we accelerated growth. Obviously, that's nirvana. And when you do that, you're going to have a very successful outcome um, uh, as a company, assuming you have a acceptable valuation, what you paid for it. So that's really what we're trying to do. But I think here's the problem. The problem is um, the the problem is the CEO and CFO, they know what they want the metrics to be, but they don't know how to get there. They're like, okay, well, I'll have a sales team and they'll do sales. I have a marketing team, they'll do marketing. Um, but they don't when it's not working. So great, you have all these metrics. My metrics say my sales productivity is not as good as I want it to be. What do you do? Well, why? It's like, and then you do deeper analysis. Well, it's I've got a performance distribution problem, or my win rates are not as high as I'd like them to be, or the deal sizes, or sales cycles are getting longer. Okay, so great. You did all this analysis. You understand that there's a problem, but you don't know why, and you don't know how to fix it. And the CEO and CFO, unfortunately, generally don't know. The things of the past, the old playbook was, well, if you want to grow more, hire more reps. Like, okay, so what ends up happening is um, you know, if you're dissatisfied, you're like, okay, it must be the sales leader. So I got to hire, they're in charge of this function. So I better replace the sales leader. And the new person will come in. And of course, the new person comes in and says, oh, well, the previous person did all these things wrong and let me fix them. And do they turn it? Oftentimes they don't. Sometimes they do. But here's the problem: the CEO and CFO don't understand what actions to take. And guess what? When you do all your marketing metrics, none of them are going to say invest in positioning and messaging. You actually have to have the business acumen, the go to market acumen to know this is part of the problem. You have a story that doesn't resonate in a market because you've done customer research and then you've come up with an innovative point of view that educates the customer on their problem. Your metrics will never tell you to do that. You need go to market acumen to know that's the lever to pull. But we have a problem with the CMO and the CRO or chief sales officer or whatever. Let's call them head of marketing, head of sales, head of customer success. They actually don't have the business acumen to say, well, what I really need to do is I need to think about, LTV to CAC. And I need to think about that by segment. I think I need to think about that by product line, by geography, and I need to break it down because LTV to CAC is a super galactic metric. So lifetime value of the customer. Okay, well, what's the average customer revenue on what's their life cycle and how does it expand over time? And then CAC. How do I think about well, how much should I spend on sales versus marketing versus customer success? Well, historically, people, when I was at Salesforce in 2010, we spent 80% of revenue, 80% of go to market spend on sales. So it was 4-to-1 sales versus marketing. I think we were 40% of revenue on sales, 8% on marketing. Now it's a little bit more like, it's a little bit closer to 2-to-1. But, if you actually think about how is the customer buying these days, they're more and more independent. So the latest Gartner data would say 80% of the buying process is done by a customer independent of talking to, the potential solution provider or
Yeah.
vendor,
Yeah.
aka sales reps. So you're spending 2/3 of your go-to-market spend on sales reps who are involved in 20% of the buying process. Is that right? Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what most people are doing.
Yeah.
So,
Certainly
there
enterprise focused companies do that.
Yeah, so I look at it. So this is the problem with that we have is like, well, the sales leader is saying, "Hey, well, you want me to make my number? I need more sales reps." And yes, I do need more marketing, but if we have a jump ball for some funding, I'll probably take the reps, or versus putting it in marketing. And this is the problem. You don't really have sales leaders who actually, in most companies, especially in like the PE backed ones where it's like 10 million to a billion ARR, if we're talking about software companies, look, you don't have somebody in most companies that actually understands all the sub functions and what are the trade offs between marketing, sales, customer success, professional services. Professional services was a dirty word for a long time. It's like, oh, professional services, low margin. Why would I want to do that? We're a SaaS company. We need to be 80% gross margin. Well, guess what? If you don't actually make your customers successful, they're going to churn.
Yeah.
And then all your superior economics that you counted on, and all that expansion goes away because the customer didn't get value. So maybe that professional services is actually important. I think people are just starting to recognize that again. And like the company that has this innovative concept is called Palantir. And all Palantir is doing is saying, you know what, we're actually going to have services combined with the software so the customer actually gets value. That's all they're doing. It's as old as time, but we got obsessed with metrics that says, well, I want 80% margin and I want to shrink that 20% margin stuff. In a recurring revenue business, you have to think more holistically than that. So I think there's a big chasm, Scott, in between how the CEO, CFO, and board think, and then how the go-to-market leaders think. And then the issue is the problem with the go-to-market leaders is it's silos. They're starting to learn how to work together, but in most companies, there's quite a ways to go.
Listen, AJ, I've enjoyed it. This is some important stuff here, very important, and I think people can take this framework, which gives some really practical things to focus on, as a good starting point. So, appreciate you being with us, and everyone that listened in. I appreciate you guys spending the time with us, and hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Very good. Thank you, Scott.
Make no mistake, good data matters for driving efficient growth and valuations. Follow me on LinkedIn, where I'm sharing insights from CFOs, investors, and strategic go-to-market execs. Thanks for listening to The Data Room.